So welcome back to this talk on finding joy in uncertainty. In the first three sections of the talk, I spoke to the uncertainties of our formal meditation practice, the uncertainty of the certainties of aging, illness, and death, and the uncertainties that we confront every moment of our daily lives. Today I want to talk about finding joy in the uncertainties of the current mess that the world finds itself in. Recognizing the world in its current state of falling apart, is it really possible to find joy here? Now, I know for me, right now at least, I'm living in relative comfort and ease. I'm not a refugee. I'm not a political prisoner. I'm not facing terror from extremist governments and politics or bombings of my home, although certainly people in this country, many people in this country are continually dealing with the uncertainties of injustice. And of course, many of us may be indeed dealing with the suffering from the impacts of climate change, floods and fires, etc. And let's be clear that joy based on these conditions is extremely difficult, if not impossible. But even within these conditions, it may be possible to find moments of joy. Being human, of course, our minds naturally are finding a negativity bias. There is a negativity bias natural to all of us. And it's important to look for joy in the small things. Absolutely, we have to. But these are conditional joys, and really what I'd like to address now is moving beyond the conditional to the unconditional joy, which, when you think about it, is, of course, why we practice what we practice. It's the joy of the Dharma, the joy of meditation, inevitably leads to unconditional joy. I think it helps to start by putting things in the greater concept of time. As humans, we generally see the time as human existence. If even that, we may even just put time in the context of our own existence now, or maybe a few generations of existence. But of course, as we know, the Earth has been around for billions of years. 4.5 billion, give or take a few. And when you condense that into 1 year, human existence has been about 23 minutes of that 1 year. So that kind of changes one's perspective quite quickly, right? We realize that, this human existence is a blip in the context of universal existence. And this is where we start to experience a bit more of emptiness, of shunyata. And we start to learn how we can hold both form and emptiness. The emptiness that we start to experience in the insubstantiality of conditioned things. The insubstantiality of this body, the insubstantiality of this house, the insubstantiality of everything around me. So this is, the form of our daily lives is basically we start to discover through practice and through insight the insubstantiality of all of this. And once that's seen and we recognize and experience those moments of freedom from that insubstantiality, freedom from the suffering that the idea of its substantiality actually exists, freedom from that, we find joy in that. Now, we can, of course, just stick with that, right? But that's escaping from what's really true and here right now in this relative world. So we find this balance between joy and emptiness, between form and emptiness, between the absolute reality and the relative reality. Of course, the relative reality is part of the absolute reality. And much of society only exists within this relative society, a relative existence, this day-to-day existence, this existence of form. As we grow in our practice, we start to see beyond that. And when we see beyond this, and we find joy in the shunyata, joy in the emptiness, we bring this to the suffering that exists, right, in the space of form. And when we think about it, of course, the uncertainties of the world now are no different than the uncertainties of the world of our moment-to-moment experience, right? Our habit is to treat them differently, right? It's happening to me versus the whole world, right? But it's really the same. And as we develop acceptance of the not knowing in our own practice, our equanimity strengthens, and we see life living through us, and we can be surprised by our moment-to-moment response. And we live into this joyful play of life. A year or so ago, one of my teachers, Kitisaro, introduced a number of us to a retranslation of the famous and important mantra that comes at the end of the Heart Sutra, the mantra related to Prajnaparamita, sitting behind me here, the Gate Gate mantra. So Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisvaha, usually translated as gone, gone, gone beyond, gone way beyond. Bodhisvaha, great, wonderful. So this other translation comes from a book by Paul Breiter, who, with Kitisaro, was a monk in the forest tradition of Ajahn Chah, and disrobed and became a lay practitioner, and spent a lot of time, I believe, practicing with Kobun Chino Roshi, who was the co-abbot of the Tassajara Monastery in California, along with Suzuki Roshi. Breiter wrote a book called One Monk, Many Masters. And in this book is this translation that he heard from Chino Roshi, who must have been a wonderful and hilarious teacher and tragically died in the early 2000s. He retranslated the Gate Gate into falling apart, everything's always falling apart, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's the way it is. Hallelujah. The hallelujah is my retranslation. He said something else. Falling apart, everything is always falling apart, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's the way it is. It's the hallelujah which is important, right? So if we just ended it, that's the way it is, this would be basically just total, well, that's how it is. Nothing I can do about it, right? Or worse, just denial that anything's falling apart. But the hallelujah actually opens us to possibility. The hallelujah is what changes it. It's like, yeah, it's always been this way. It's always been falling apart, right? And the potential that exists in that has always been there as well. And this is what's key. And this is where the joy comes in, right? So rather than turning toward the mess that's here and thinking, oh no, it's just getting worse and worse and there's nothing that can be done about it, we can change the view, and that change really comes directly from our own practice. So what we discover in the not knowing of our formal meditation practice, the not knowing of death or illness or loss, when that's going to happen, the not knowing of just the moment-to-moment existence of our lives, when we find joy in those things and see the potential in those moments, we can see the potential in what's happening now. And this is our opportunity, and this is how we bring our practice into the messiness of the world. This is how appropriate response comes, through the recognition of this and the opening up to the possibilities created by this falling apart. To quote from James Baldwin and his wonderful poem, "For Nothing is Fixed," right? He states it very clearly, right? Nothing is fixed, for nothing is fixed forever, forever, forever. It is not fixed. The earth is always shifting. The light is always changing. So, of course, this has always been the case, and it will always be the case. The question is, can we find joy in that? Can we find opportunity? Can we open to it? And can we start to see clearly how the joy that we begin to experience in our daily practice, in our meditation practice, the joy that's possible when we recognize that death and old age, etc., are right over our shoulder all the time, and how alive that can make us when that realization happens. How alive can it make us when we start to experience the world in its current state, falling apart, not from a place of turning away or from just throwing up our hands, but rather, yes, this is what's possible. And the great teacher Joanna Macy, refers to the great turning. And this is the great turning. It's the recognition that there is potential. There is potential, and that potential arises from joy. That potential arises from love, from turning toward the experience with love and joy. And yes, people are going to die. Systems are going to collapse. There's going to be massive climate migration, no doubt. There's going to be political upheaval. All of that is likely to happen, not necessarily in my lifetime or even your lifetime, but soon enough. And in that, possibility opens. In that, true potential arises. And we have to be willing to turn toward it with acceptance, with joy, and with love. So thank you for your attention. I hope you found these talks helpful. I would enjoy engaging with you, so feel free to leave comments, questions, responses in the comment section below. I'd look forward to hearing from you. So take care and stay safe.